All right, good morning, and thank you for being here. One more time. Whoops, wrong button. So one thing that's different this year is you're used to seeing Jim Joyner MC this event, and I just introduce him. I'm Jim Zott, Director for the Project Management Program. I succeeded Jim. He founded the program here, oh my goodness, 22 years ago. And he's gone fishing. He's doing well. He's now living in Waco. Waco's not as close as Cattle Mills for driving in for this thing. And so he wishes everybody here the best. His grandkids or great-grandkids are down there in Waco, and so he's close to family. Somebody came and knocked on his door on the ranch out in Cattle and said, "Would you like to sell your property?" And they thought about it, and they says, "Okay." And so he's moved south. So he's here in spirit and wishes you a good journey. Since this is a PMI registered education provider type event, we do have learning objectives that we need to share with you. And so hopefully, once you get through with the symposium here, you will be able to describe some of the latest thinking that you've heard and maybe have some ideas for how you could improve your own practice of project management and perhaps identify some things that you want to go look into for further study. In terms of further study, of course, we do have a graduate degree program here at UT Dallas. It's a pretty good one. UT Dallas is a pretty good school. If you go look at the website for the school itself, you can see all kinds of links to places where we've got good ratings, and the U.S. News and World Report Business Best Grad Schools is just one of them. The graduate program in project management that I'm responsible for, of course, the Jindal School of Management is accredited by AACSB, the flagship of the accrediting agencies for business schools, and the project management program is accredited by the Project Management Institute's Global Accreditation Center for Project Management Education Programs, which is a mouthful. We're the only program in North Texas to have that accreditation. Problem? Is this better? Okay. Always check your props, they say. Okay. So I will not repeat the commercial louder. That'd be like watching midnight television. We also offer professional development programs. Some of you may have gone through our PMP exam prep course. For those that are looking to fill out your PDUs in the non-technical side of things, the exec ed area of the School of Management, we have a certificate of management program, which is self-paced, which mainly focuses on the leadership and strategic and business side of the talent triangle. And we also do some corporate programs as well. So we're pretty active in the project management community. Putting an event together like this takes a lot of work, and fortunately I do very little of it. We have a great steering team composed of David Pells, David, from PM World Journal, from the PMI Dallas Chapter, who starting at the end you see 41 volunteers. They're all in red shirts today and tomorrow to help you get where you're going and to facilitate some of the events. And then we have Ariane Stone, Susan Kennedy, Leah Getachew, and Joe Carson. If you all are in the room, please stand up and be recognized. We've taken a fairly unique approach with this since the beginning. There was a strong partnership with the Dallas chapter of PMI to put on this event, and we certainly couldn't do it without the chapter. And then, of course, our staff here at UT Dallas, we've got Jerry Hogue and John Barden, the Deans in Executive Education, Debbie Flynn, Kathy Lovelace, who are my staff, as well as Wei Wong, who you see over here handling the technical support. And then also from alumni and other parts of the school, we've got Kurt Raschke and Gene Spryer. And so those of you that are in the room, please stand up and wave. And yep. So they're the ones to thank, and of course Debbie and Kathy are the ones to ask if you have questions. I probably can't be much help, but and if you haven't seen the signs, as of last year, we're a smoke, vape, and tobacco-free campus. So for most of us, we think that's a good thing. For those of you that really need to have a smoke, the official rules are to go off campus, although I've been known to catch people smoking by the air intake to the School of Management behind a column and polluting my room, but that's another story. Wireless. So we do have a guest wireless access, and so the username is comment and the password is fearless. You can also find that in the phone app. If you haven't thought to put your phones on silent or vibrate, please do so now. For the most part, I've been to a lot of conventions in the last few years, and I think we've learned to do that, but we'll still remind you anyway, just in case. If you do need to take a call or get into a quiet space besides the hallway for a call, we have two, we call them business lounges. Basically, they're just flat classrooms, or actually one's a tiered classroom. One's in this building, which is right over there by that corner. There's also a patio that you could go outside on, and the restrooms in this building are also over on this side. And then in the main Jindal School of Management, where the breakouts are being held, we have the business lounges right inside the Executive Education Center as you come through the main hallway there. And you can see we're same rooms as last year. We're on the, if you've been here for prior symposia. So we take over the first floor of the Jindal School of Management and the main part of the old building and hold our breakouts and panel discussions over there. So in this room, we'll have our keynotes, we'll have lunch, we'll have the networking reception tonight, and we'll have interactive sessions tomorrow. So we'll be doing a lot in this building. And then the breakouts, panel discussions will be across the street in the Naveen Jindal School of Management. So schedule-wise, it works out where you're not going to be crossing the street a whole lot. So we're here this morning, we'll have the keynotes, we'll have our coffee break, and then we'll do the breakouts for 3 sessions in the Jindal School of Management. There will also be coffee available in the atrium in the southwest corner of the building and the panels. And then we'll come back here for an afternoon keynote, which will close off the day except and be followed by the reception. Tomorrow, we've got a great keynote presentation, and he's invited his friends as well, so there'll be extra people with different kinds of badges in here tomorrow morning, so please come early and be on time. We've got the president of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank, who has also served every 3 years. He serves on the committee that gets to mess with our interest rates, and so it should be a very interesting session. We're very excited to have him here. And as you can imagine, getting somebody that high profile adds a new dimension of complexity to some of the arrangements, but we're really happy to have him here and encourage you all to get here on time and get a good seat, because I think the room should be fairly packed. And so then we'll take a break, have our second keynote, then we'll have our breakouts. The afternoon, we're doing something different. So we ask you to fill out the surveys after the conference and give us feedback. And for those that give the feedback, we appreciate it, and hopefully you see that we've made some changes. One of the changes has been the addition of more interactive sessions. And so tomorrow afternoon, we've got 2 interactive session tracks. So one track, the one off on the far left on the schedule, that's actually 2 events tied together. And so if you select that for your afternoon, you'll be in, we'll pull a divider in here, and you'll be in one part of the ballroom for the full afternoon. For those of you that want to attend one of the afternoon tracks, you'll see those on the 5 right columns, and then after you finish that, you'll come back in here, and then you'll be in the other interactive session for the, what does that say? Scrum, the board game. So that's the plan, and so hopefully you'll enjoy the interaction and then doing some hands-on things to close out the symposium, so it's not just all sit and try to stay awake after a heavy lunch, perhaps. So that's the schedule. Of course, we also have the app. One other thing that we've done different is we get more than a few comments about less paper and, gee, why are you giving us bags again? I got a bag for the last 3 years. And so bags are optional. If you want a bag, we still have some out there, so feel free to take one. We've gotten rid of the printed user guide, program guide, and so now it's all on the Symposium app that you can download from the iOS App Store or Google Play and do all your information there. And the neat thing about the app is you can enter when you sign up, you register in it, you enter your PMI identification number, and then when you record what sessions you've attended, we'll automatically upload your PDUs for you. And as you can imagine, with the institution of the talent triangle, each session that you attend has to be reported separately. The old days, you could go to a conference and say, okay, I was at the conference and that was 15 PDUs or 20 PDUs or whatever it was and be done with it. Now you've got to report each individual session because they all have different breakouts in the talent triangle. Kind of a pain, both to set up and to do, but we take care of that for you. So that's on the app. If you haven't already done it, please go ahead and do that. The schedule is there. You'll need to sign in first. Once you sign in, you stay signed in. I'm signed in on mine, and I was looking to see where can I sign out to check how sign-in works, and I couldn't find a sign out. So I think once you're signed in, you're in for good. which I guess is a good thing. You fill in your information, again, put in your PMI identification number, not your PMP certificate number. And that will get you your PDUs automatically submitted if you do the rest of what you need to do here. And so we've got, you can look at the schedule, and if you click on a schedule item, you'll get into more details. And if you scroll down, you can see where it says mark as attended. Once you mark it as attended, that's the signal to us to go off and submit your PDUs. And then right below it, you've got a tab where you can submit your evaluation of that particular speaker. And you cannot submit an evaluation for the speaker unless you mark the event as attended, obviously, right? That makes sense. So please leave feedback, and we've got a system set up where if you get it done by next Friday, we'll enter you in a drawing for a free symposium attendance next year. And then same thing with the overall survey for the overall event. That's a exit survey link. That's on the More page. And again, same deal. One person that submits by next Friday will get a free admission for next year as well. So we do look at that feedback. We take it very seriously. I occasionally have to remind the team that one comment does not create a mandate. It might be an outlier, or it might represent the majority. We don't know. So the more comments we get saying the same thing, the more likely it is to create some change. So that's the app. We do have dates for next year. As you can imagine, the university is growing, and there's more and more demand for these excellent facilities. And one thing that's happened is the summer semester is starting on Thursday, right after graduation week next year, and so we're in a bit of a bind. So we will be holding the symposium on Tuesday and Wednesday, rather than Thursday and Friday next year. So hopefully that's not a big problem for you all, that you can still go to work on Monday, get things kicked off, come to symposium Tuesday, Wednesday, then finish off the week at work on Thursday and Friday. So mark your calendar. We look forward to seeing you next year as well. Again, we have the networking reception tonight at 4:45, right after the closing keynote. Keynote's in here, reception is right outside. So please stick around and do some more networking. So that's my introductory remarks. Thank you very much. Jerry Hogue is our Associate Dean for Executive Education. He's got a few words, and then he's going to introduce our morning keynote speaker. Thank you, Jerry.
Good morning. Welcome to UT Dallas. This is our 12th annual symposium, Project Management Symposium, and it is one of the largest of this type in the country. It's been very successful here in North Texas, and we're proud to host it each year. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our keynote speaker, Jim Keyes. Jim is one of those classic American success stories. He grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in the Northeast, but managed to get himself into and finished college, and then even an MBA from Columbia. Jim was pointed in the direction of finance and ended up with the U.S. operations of the Venezuelan oil and gas company, PDVSA. Many of you probably don't remember when convenience stores didn't have oil and gas for sale, but there was a time when they did not. And as 7-Eleven moved into that arena, they also decided then to make an upstream acquisition and buy the refining operations of PDVSA. So Jim then became part of 7-Eleven and moved rather quickly to the role of Chief Financial Officer and ultimately CEO of 7-Eleven for a number of years, until the Japanese affiliate bought it out, and then Jim decided that he would move on to something different. While there, Jim added a lot of new services, new products, and the 7-Eleven stores became larger and more diverse with product and services than in the past. But it did provide not only growth, but greater profitability. Jim then took on the challenge of trying to save Blockbuster. When he joined, of course, it was already struggling, and Jim started adding services and products to Blockbuster. and actually with good success. He also had plans to start their own Netflix, if you will, and they were in a stronger position at that point than Netflix. However, the investors decided to pull the plug, and that was the end of Blockbuster. Since that time, Jim has been running a smaller company, kind of an entrepreneurial activity on the West Coast called Wild Oats, which has a line of health and organic products for supermarkets. So now, Jim has kind of capped his career that way by being one of the Horatio Alger Award winners, which of course is a very prestigious award, and we're proud of him for that award. Jim's successes have not been limited to business, however. Given the importance of education in his own life, some years ago, Jim started the Education is Freedom Foundation. For other kids who might not otherwise be able to go to college, they can apply to the foundation for financial help. And Jim also has been active in the arts. I think he even paints, but he also has been on the symphony board for a number of years and chaired it several years ago. So his interests are broad and his successes are many. We're glad to have you, Jim.
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning. Okay, so thank you. This is, we're going to talk about, I'm going to start with some things that I would characterize as sort of my rule of thumb in either leadership or project management. If I'm talking about leadership, I usually talk about 3 C's. Talk about change, confidence, and complexity, ironically, keeping things simple. And I'm going to share those and how they relate to project management. But I've also got, when we're talking about leading a project and leading people, whether it's a small team or whether it's an entire corporation or maybe even a country, I think there are 7 things that are really critical to success. And I'm going to share those with you this morning. I'm going to talk about change, and I'm going to talk about confidence, those 2 things, and I'm going to share with you that confidence is walking onto a podium like this without a PowerPoint presentation and doing it yourself on the fly with somebody to teach you, right? Are we going to do this? Yeah. Okay. Right here? All right. Yeah, watch this. Hey, it worked. Okay, and then the second one, I go like this. Yep, please. Perfect. Will I be able to fit 7 on there? Okay, perfect. Thank you. How's that? PowerPoint on the fly. All right, so we're going to talk about, we're going to start by talking about change. And well, let me try something. I've never done this before. I'm going to give this a try. Okay. All right. Can you help me with something? Okay, come on, Cliff. There you go, Cliff. I like your seat better than mine. All right, will you just stay there? Okay. All right, so, hi, I'm Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Nice to see you. I'm Jim. Oh, you guys wondering what I'm doing? So I'm making him feel really, really uncomfortable. Let's just look at him for a couple minutes, right? How you doing up there, Cliff? You're way more comfortable with this than there should be. All right, well, thanks for being my victim. Point I was trying to make is no one likes change. Cliff was perfectly comfortable right here, right? I picked him because he sat up front. Anybody that's crazy enough to sit that close to the front is probably going to be an okay victim to do something like that. If I went to the back, you guys would be really uncomfortable with the idea of change, right? Because you're the ones that don't want any like attention. I just want to sit in the back, keep my head down. So, point is, if you're leading a project, you've got to recognize that the people that you're working with may or may not want to even be there, or may or may not embrace change, because change is really the hardest thing in the world for people to accept. When you're leading a corporation or whether you're leading a team of 5, you've got to understand that it's almost an inertia when you're trying to move forward. I don't know of any project that isn't trying to create change, right? But when you're trying to move people that don't want to change, or move a process that doesn't want to change, or a corporation that doesn't want to change because everybody's comfortable sitting right where they're sitting, doing right what they're doing. And they've done it maybe for years and years and years. So you've got to find a way to break through that clutter and get people to embrace change and accept it. It sounds simple, it sounds just like words, but it's so critical. And let me share with you a story, my favorite, about change, because I had the same situation. When I joined 7-Eleven, not too many years after I joined, about 5 years after I joined the company, it went bankrupt. If you think it was crazy to take on the challenge of Blockbuster, I was like, heck, I've already done that. I've already been through a company that went bankrupt. This can't be that hard. Because 7-Eleven in 1991 filed for Chapter 11 protection. It was bankrupt. And I went to the founders of the company and said, hey guys, what do I do? I mean, this is a career now. I'm still a young guy. What do I do? And they told me this great story. How many of you know 7-Eleven was born here in Dallas? Actually, Oak Cliff, 12th Street, a little ice house called the Southland Ice Company. Remember 7-Eleven used to be the Southland Corporation? Well, it was the Southland Ice Company. And the Southland Ice Company sold 50-pound blocks of ice in 1927 when it started by a guy named Joe C. Thompson. And then in 1928, somebody invented something called the Frigidaire. Imagine what that does to your business model. All you sell is ice. And people buy that ice and they put it in their ice box. It's even hard to imagine. How did they do that in Dallas, Texas, right? But that's what they did. And then somebody invents something you plug in the wall and you don't need to keep ice to keep things cold anymore. So what they did is they talked to their customers. And their customers said, well, we still need things for our refrigerator. Why don't you sell us the bread and milk? You've already got all the ice to keep it cold, so you could sell us those other things off the dock. And they did, and they adapted. The moral of that story, this is 1990 now, that the son of the founder is telling me that story, and he said, Jim, if we didn't change, then we would have been out of business in 1928. But instead, we recognized that our business wasn't selling ice, our business was convenience. And that created a whole new concept. I said, wow, that's a great story. I love that story. But now you're going to go out of business. So what's up with that? And he said, well, think about it. We stopped changing. Here we were in 1990, and we sold cigarettes and beer and beef jerky, and everybody sold those things. Yeah, we were open 24 hours. Everybody copied us and was open 24 hours. So there wasn't anything unique about 7-Eleven in 1990. And he said, the problem is we've defined ourselves as a place to buy beer and cigarettes. If you want to stay with the company, figure out what people need more conveniently, just like we did in 1927, and you'll be fine. And I took that challenge and went out and started sourcing products all over the world, finding unique things. Prepaid phone cards didn't exist in the United States until we brought them into 7-Eleven because we found them in Europe and Asia and created a whole market, created a whole industry for it. Fresh foods, a good quality sandwich that you can grab on the fly didn't even exist. It was hard to get one other than going to a Subway. And so we did all of these different things, created a whole nationwide network of ATMs. We used to have to, I don't know if you remember, we used to have to go to a bank for an ATM back in the day. And we created a whole nationwide network of ATMs. So there are all kinds of ways that you can stimulate change. But in the case of 7-Eleven, I had to hold up the flag and lead that charge for the people to be able to accept that change was okay. It was actually good. It was the lifeblood of our business at retail. But in your case, you're going to have the same challenge. How do you figure out how to have that acceptance of change? So then the second that I'm going to give you, the second C, let's see if I can do this. Somebody's got to have confidence, because what you're going to find is the hardest thing about making change is everybody's afraid to do it. Cliff, on the other hand, just like marched right up here. He had no problem at all sitting on the stage. That was confidence, actually. It was a good example of it. Anybody else want to try it? It's hard. It's hard to put yourself out there. You don't know what confidence is until you've taken on the challenge of leading Blockbuster, and then all of a sudden the financial markets collapse, and you're trying to transition the company from brick and mortar into digital, and you have $1 billion of debt and $300 million of it coming due, and you have to refinance it, but Lehman Brothers collapsed, the banks are closed, and you can't refinance your debt, and you're trying to keep the company going, and all of a sudden your picture shows up in the New York Post with a Pinocchio nose and a big headline, "Blockbusted." And then you got to go to work the next day and you got to deal with your friends from New York who send you emails saying, "Hey, nice picture. Good nose." You know? Seriously, full color. It was really pretty. I have a slide. Be glad I didn't bring it. It's not so flattering. But you have to realize it's not about you. So whether it's leading a corporation or leading a project, it's not about you. It's not personal. And you're going to run into some really nasty, if you've been assigned the challenge of, as my first job at 7-Eleven, cut $50 million of G&A. As a kid, I mean, came right out of school, end up at 7-Eleven, leading a team, a project team, to find $50 million in G&A because they had hired BCG, and no one wanted to listen to BCG, and they also didn't want to pay him $2 million to do the study. So they assembled a team of employees. And here I came from the gasoline division. They've got me leading this team of employees to cut $50 million of G&A. I had to check under my car on the way home because I was not a very popular guy. But I also knew it needed to be done. It was critical to the success of the company. And if I had the confidence to make that happen, it would be good for the company. And at the end of the day, it would be good for me. And I couldn't take it personally. People would say some pretty mean things when you're out there trying to cut G&A. How many of you have ever had a project like that you had to lead? Cutting expenses. It's brutal, right? I mean, you're like, no one likes you. Even your dog doesn't wag his tail when you get home, and you start really getting complex. He's afraid he's going to get riffed. So confidence is really critical. You have to have the courage to be able to make change, and you have to share that confidence with your team as well so that they also can embrace change and be able to move forward as a team. So you're going to run into that kind of resistance. The third, whoops, yeah, I knew this was too easy, too good to be true. Here we go. Wait, I'm going to clean this up. We've got to make this right. There we go. Complexity. To effectively lead a project, you've got to make it really complex, so complex that no one else can understand it. No, come on, that works. That's how you get promoted, right? Why do you think the accounting profession exists? No one understands it. It's so complex. I'm kidding. Are there any CPAs in here? Obviously not. I would have heard boos. Albert Einstein once said, "Genius is taking the highly complex and making it simple." I don't think he used those words, but something to that effect. True genius is taking things that are really complex and making them simple. The absolute enemy of change, of progress, of success in a corporation, of success in a project is complexity. Because if someone doesn't understand what it is you're trying to get them to do, how in the world are they going to execute it? I think Einstein also has a great quote that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you probably can't make it happen. And it's the same in business because your people have to be able to not only understand it, but they have to explain it. So is anyone ever like in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts? Oh, what do they call them? They just call them Scouts now. Anyone Boy Scout, Girl Scout? Indian guides? Whatever those things are. You sit around a campfire, and you tell a story, and you whisper something into somebody else's ear. And it goes around the story. It goes around the campfire, and it comes back. I mean, it could be something as simple as, the deer ran through the woods, and by the time it comes back, it's like, a bear ate my lunch, right? Because every time someone takes your words and tries to explain them, they morph them just a little bit. And so the more complex something is, the more that morphing occurs and the less recognizable it will be on the other end. This is Management 101. You're in an organization at 7-Eleven. Remember that G&A cutting exercise? We once had like 17 layers of management between the CEO and the person at the store. 17 layers. So how do you ever get something done in an organization where you have to tell somebody what you want done, and then it gets reinterpreted and retold 17 times? And what comes out the other end? It's just like that campfire circle. It's exactly the same thing in management. So that's why I say the enemy of progress and success in project management is complexity. So how do you break through the clutter of what it is you're doing and make it simple enough so people can understand it? It's not an easy challenge, but it's one that you really can't ignore. It has to be foremost in your focus on the project. All right, next. There we go. By about the 7th one, I'll have this figured out. I'll get it right. All right, culture. So let's say you embrace change. Let's say you've got confidence. Let's say you're able to break through the complexity and be able to explain things. How do you create the culture on your team or in your corporation to be able to move forward and make progress? So this is the other thing. Too often, the reason that you got promoted to lead a project or you're asked to take a leadership position is because you're so good at what you do. But being good at what you do doesn't make you be good at what someone else does, or be able to lead them in being good at what they do. So when it comes to setting a culture, it starts with you. It starts at the top, whether it's the top of the corporation or the top of your team. And one of the things I like to do when it came to a corporate culture is try to lead by example. So whether it's taking a role in the community, as Jerry had mentioned, and encouraging others to do that, or let's say we're working on product innovation. That was one that Jerry mentioned at 7-Eleven. We went from 10 years of same-store sales declines when we were bankrupt in 1990 to 10 years of same-store sales increases every quarter for 10 years afterwards, after we started to embrace change and look for new products to bring into the store. So how did we end up introducing at 7-Eleven 50 new items a week for 10 years? Where do you find 50 new items a week? What I would do is everywhere I would go, I would find a product that could be adapted, could be made more convenient, could be morphed. I mean, I'll give you a good example. How many of you drink beer? Oh, come on. How many of you drink at all? Okay, that was a test just to see if you were lying. Remember we used to drink out of those old plastic bottles about 10 years ago? They were really kind of goofy looking. Miller Beer had them and Budweiser had them, the little plastic bottles with beer in them. You ever drink beer out of a plastic bottle? It's not a great experience. I think they're still out there, but it's not a great experience. One time I was in Japan, and you know that movie Lost in Translation? I don't know if you saw the movie, but he gets to Japan, he's sitting there on the edge of the bed, he's like, jet lagged and thinks he's in another, he can't sleep, gets up all night long in the middle of the night, goes to the mini bar. This was me. Went to the mini bar looking for water. I didn't want to turn on the lights because you don't want to wake up even more, you're already awake. So I reached in the mini bar, and here is a can of what I didn't know, I thought it was water, grapefruit juice. I took it out, and it was so cold, I put it down. I was like, wow, what is that? And it was a little thing like this of grapefruit juice, but it was super, super cold. And I was like, wow, imagine drinking a beer out of that. Wouldn't that be good? Better than drinking it out of a plastic bottle, right? So I brought that can back to the United States, and I challenged my team. I said, hey, how about this? Have you seen this? And we ended up, it took 2 years to get Budweiser ultimately to do it, and I'll share a little more about that story later, but I had to actually offer to build the line, to spend $1 million to build the line, and I was trying to get it exclusively in exchange for that package, because I knew that package would be great for convenience. Remember my challenge, Walmart would sell beer 50 cents below my cost just to drive traffic into their stores. So I had to find ways to differentiate so you'd be willing to pay a little more, and cold beer was a good way to do it, to be able to sell a package that would stay colder or to sell beer that was already cold when you pulled it out of the vault. So by taking on these challenges myself of constantly trying to find things to innovate, I set a tone for my organization that no one wanted me to find a product before they would find it. I set the tone for the culture. We created a culture of intellectual curiosity at 7-Eleven. That's the way I like to describe it. So it doesn't matter if it's new product introduction or whatever it is. If you can create on your team a culture of intellectual curiosity, it helps you break through all that other stuff of confidence, and because it becomes the way everybody thinks. When they come into the team and they come into the project, they're thinking, I want to challenge the status quo. I want to understand why things happen. And it just makes them think. So that idea of setting a culture and being able to engage everyone in the group, in the creative process, ends up really being a very beneficial thing. Well, let's talk about creativity. Oh, man. I told you, I'm going to get this eventually. Here we go. You didn't know creativity. It's really creative to spell it with a J. Twice. Ta-da. Okay, so who's creative in here? Anybody a creative? What do you do? Yeah, that requires creativity. Do you paint? Do you sing? Do you dance? All right, come on. Come on, we walked right into that one. You knew that was coming. Anyone else? Oh, Cliff, come on. What do you do? You paint? We should have had you do some up here. Set up a little easel. Oils or acrylics?
Pastel.
Pastel, that's even harder. Man, you must be good. Okay, so nobody else is an artist in here? What do you do? Singer. You're a singer. Nah, we won't make it. It's too early. It's way too early for that. So I'm going to challenge you on this one. Everyone in here is creative. Every single person is creative. Jim? You don't feel very creative? You're scared. You're like, what are you going to do? No, I'm serious. Everybody is creative. I'm gonna encourage you to think back. Do you remember when you were 5 years old? Who didn't write all over the walls with crayons, right? Who didn't have a blast with paints, finger paints? We were all creative. Only here's what happened. The reason I paint today, I swear this is true. I did a little paint by numbers thing, and it was horrible. I still have it today. I found it. I went back to my old house, which had been knocked down, and literally I was rummaging through the remnants of this place I used to live, and I found my first painting. It was a paint by numbers thing. I brought it home, cleaned it up, I framed it. Because when I didn't stay in the lines, the difference is, my mom, for whatever reason, who was not an artist, she was not creative, but she looked at that painting and said, my son's an impressionist. Right? Now, what mom would do that? We're up in Plano. How many Plano moms would say, stay in the lines, that's terrible, you've got to go back, do it again, stay in the lines, you're a terrible artist. And that happens to all of us, whether it's we stand up and sing and one of our friends makes fun of us, right? Obviously your friends didn't make fun of you, you must have been good. Or if we did something wrong, if we got finger paints all over the wall and got spanked for it, we've had the creativity beat out of us from the time we were little children. And many of us just gave up, And my point is, you've all got it. No one lost it. Humans are creative. It's just that our right brain is tired. It's just not used. It's not challenged like everything else. So challenge yourself. Creativity is an important part of leadership, of project management. You can't create change unless you can work that right brain, open it up, and let it start thinking about what's possible, what's different, what's unique, and have the courage to be able to lay it out there. Because here's what happens with art, whether it's painting, whether it's singing. I finally discovered there's no such thing as good or bad. It's like that Blockbuster picture, with the pointy Pinocchio nose. It wasn't good or bad, it just is. It wasn't personal. Somebody thought that looked good. I didn't. Somebody did. And I can stand up here and create a painting, and 90% of you may say, boy, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. But if I like it, and it expresses my creative thought, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter. So there is no good or bad. You ever go to MoMA in New York, Museum of Modern Art? I don't know if you saw this exhibit, but I saw an exhibit of hair. There's like 50 jars. Someone cut their hair for 50 years and put it in jars. And you can see the progression of dark to lighter to light to white to crinkly. Hair. That's art? Come on, art? But who am I to say that that wasn't beautiful and that wasn't someone expressing creativity? It was in the museum. It's probably worth $10 million, Point is, there's no such thing as wrong or bad when it comes to creativity. And that's what you've got to be able to nurture in your team, to be able to stimulate their creativity. And how many times somebody come up with an idea and you can't help it? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? Well, there is no bad idea. It's a matter of how to interpret it, how to work it, bring it around. Which leads to... Come on now, no applause? I got to thank you, the first one. It took what, 5 of them, 6 of them, 5 of them. Collaboration. The challenge that I've already mentioned is you can't do it alone. Now here's where it becomes really difficult. You don't have to just collaborate within your team. You got to find a way to collaborate outside of your team, because the project won't have a chance of success unless you can engage stakeholders beyond the realm of the team. So even if the team is fully collaborating and working together, how do you begin to reach out and bring others in and get that collaboration going? I'll give you a great example as it relates to even other companies, because sometimes whatever project it is you're working on, you need to reach out to other companies. Case of Coca-Cola, Vanilla Coke, let's use that one. So, first job, McDonald's, drinking fountain drinks, right? And I got bored. All they had was Coke and Sprite or something like that. And when you're working at McDonald's, you spice up your hamburgers when you work there, because you got to figure out some way to make them taste a little different after you eat hamburgers every day for years. And so what I used to do to my Coke is put a little squirt from the milkshake machine, a little vanilla in the Coke, or a little strawberry in the Coke, and it would change the flavor of it. And it was like, wow, that's really good. Fountain drink, vanilla Coke. So here I am at 7-Eleven trying to differentiate, trying to figure out what to do. I go to Coke and say, hey guys, I got an idea. Let's do vanilla Coke. And they're like, it ain't ever gonna happen. You don't understand. Our formula, Coke is Coke is Coke is Coke, and we're never ever gonna blah, blah, blah. And besides, stay out of this. We do product innovation. You guys keep your mouth shut and sell it. You buy what we sell you. In fact, We're going to buy the door so you don't even have to think about it. We're just going to buy that whole vault door. We'll give you an allowance for it. We'll manage it. Just stay out of this. This is what we do, right? And this is a literal conversation with Coke and Pepsi. They were both, that's the way things were done back in the day. Retailers weren't supposed to collaborate on product development. It just wasn't our role. We were just supposed to sell this stuff. Well, how do you sell more of the stuff if you don't change it, if you don't come up with new stuff? And how do you come up with new stuff if the supplier gives it to you the same time they give it to everybody else? So if Budweiser came up with that aluminum bottle and they give it to everybody at the same time, Walmart's going to sell it 50 cents cheaper than me. Now I have no point of advantage. But if I can find that for them and help them innovate and collaborate with them on the development, now I have every right to ask them for 6 months of exclusivity, which I did. Now, hindsight, what I should have done is gone to get a patent on the design patent on the bottle, and I wouldn't be here today, or I'd be coming to you live from my yacht via Skype. But I didn't. But collaboration is critical. It's critical to any project, whether it's just collaboration within your team, the first level of collaboration within the greater company, or in many cases, the success of your project may depend on collaboration with other companies, and that's when it becomes exponentially more difficult, but also exponentially more important. Because you talk about resisting change, you're really going to run into a lot of change resistance when you try to push another company to do something that they think is their job already. And finally, when it comes to collaboration, again, I think what you're going to find, I'm going to talk about collaboration and the strength of diversity. You know, diversity can take on so many roles, but what you need to own is the idea that diversity is a strength. Because if you populate your team or your company with people that look just like you and think just like you, you're going to get a very narrowly focused product. The more different, the more unique you can create a team that represents true diversity and of all types in critical thinking, then the more success you're going to have. It's a little harder to manage, because you're going to have a lot of different input in a lot of different directions, but it's going to be a lot better product at the end of the day. I did it again. There's a lot of pressure doing this live in front of everybody. You try to fast, so you know you're not up here. Okay, and then so finally, the seventh of these, and they scrolled up. How do I scroll them back down? There we go. Perfect. Collaboration. Huh? Thank you. The importance of community. You can't do it all yourself, right? So Jerry mentioned that I've been involved in a lot of philanthropic efforts, and you know, there's two ways to look at it. He said, "Man, Jim's really a very thoughtful guy, and he likes to do things for other people." Now, I figured out a long time ago, shareholder value and social good are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're complementary. I can make a lot of money by doing good things for people. Look at Newman's Own, right? Created a huge company, Newman's Own, the products that are out there, and they give 50% of their profits back. And it's just, it goes to show that doing good can also be very, very valuable. You can make a lot of money out of it. How does that relate to project management and leadership? Well, what I'd encourage you to do is also find a way within any given project to find an angle that allows that project to do good for the company or the community at large? Is there a way you can weave into what it is you're working on something that will affect the greater good? It may be just the greater good of the team or the company, or depending on the nature of the product, it could be, or project, it could be the greater good within the community itself. I encourage you to always keep that top of mind, because it's something that tends to slide down. My example, Jerry mentioned an organization called Education is Freedom. At 7-Eleven, we were giving, I think, $400,000 a year away to different charitable organizations, all well and good. My board came to me one day and said, "You got to cut that in half. We don't show any benefit from $400,000 worth of philanthropic giving. Cut it in half." So what does a manager do when you're being asked to cut something in half? Well, I can either cut it in half, which I know is probably not a good thing for the community or the company or the employees, or I could find a way to prove that I get a return on investment. So I stepped back and said, what does the company, what does 7-Eleven need? Its biggest challenge was hiring. They had 400,000 people. How do you find a way to stop the outflow? We had 100% turnover of people at store level. Well, what if I went into the public school system and started investing in the public school system and tell these kids in 7th or 8th grade that, hey, you can be a store manager. They make $40,000 a year. We'll help you go through college, become a store manager, and then move through the system. Here's how it works. Let's show you the way. So it was a way to selfishly generate a return on investment for the company, but also do something good for the community at the same time. And those opportunities exist out there. They will never happen if they're not top of mind. The easy answer was, cut the philanthropic budget. Okay, cut. That's easy. It may not be the right thing to do. One of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker talks about the difference between leadership and management. I had the good fortune, Jerry, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I had the good fortune of sitting down with Peter Drucker like weeks before he passed away, and was invited to his home, and I sat down one-on-one, just had a great chat, and several hours just talking to him about management, leadership, and he described leadership versus management. And he said, management is doing things right. So you have to manage, you have to make sure you do everything right. Leadership, on the other hand, is doing the right things. When it comes to community, leadership is doing the right things, and you'll be rewarded for leadership by doing those right things versus just managing. So I encourage you, as a leader of a project, or ultimately if you're running a company, to get yourself out of the role of managing the project and be a leader of the project. It's project leadership, not just project management, which is what I'll leave you with. So thank you very much for your patience. So Jerry, do we have time for a few questions? Anyone have any questions? Is that for me? Yeah. Can I not use this?
Oh, this will be for the...
Oh, that's for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We have one back there. When you're finished, can you hand the phone to him so he can do a little song for us? Sure. I know.
So you said that you liked people who are creative, but creative people can be very challenging, I think, because they're so creative. You know, they're not in the lines. So how did you, most organizations don't really, they say they want creative people, but they really don't want them out the lines. So how did you manage creative people?
How did I manage the creative people? Oh, they drove me nuts. They still do. But it's, I think, probably because I'm more accepting of those different ideas and creativity in itself. I try not to beat the entrepreneur out of them or the creativity out of them. I'll give you an example. I like to say that I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm not a normal entrepreneur. I came from a corporate environment, right? Well, think about that. That's an oxymoron. A corporate entrepreneur, right? It's like, how does that work? Because the idea of corporate is to conform and be one as a whole, right? The idea of an entrepreneur is to be out there and be individual. How can you be a corporate entrepreneur? Well, what happens in a corporation is they beat the entrepreneur out of you. I used to talk about a herd of zebras, and they'll kill each other, trampling each other to get to the center of the pack if a lion shows itself on the outside, right? And that's what happens in a corporation, though. People kill themselves to get to the center of the pack to be safe, right? It happens too often, so no one wants to take risk, and people try to conform. So what happens is it dumbs down the creative process in the result, in the end. So when someone's out there and they're being a little bit creative, what I try to do is just encourage the rest of the group to understand what it is they're trying to do and not to beat them down quite so much. At the end of the day, there's a practical limit on how much time everybody has. You got a project to get done. You can't be too creative, so there's delicate balance there. But the reason I brought it out is I do want to encourage everybody to try to foster that creativity and don't slam the person who is, out there with a different point of view.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, do you have a request?
You keep daring me, I'm going to do it.
Go for it.
All right.
What do we want?
There are projects big, there are projects small. Sometimes stakeholders drive you up the wall. There are times without hope when you can't define scope. It's a project after all. Everybody, it's a project after all. Can't hear you. It's a project after all. It's a project after all. It's a project after all.
Bravo. I slipped him $20 outside. He's not even part of this group. I
got
no
one
one's
over
going to
here.
believe that that was spontaneous, but it really was. Nice job.
All right, I got one over here, right here. Hi. I just want to hear the rest of the story on the vanilla Coke thing. How did that turn out in the end? I mean, how did it?
Yeah.
Because it's clear that it happened. Thanks.
Oh yeah. It took forever. I kept pressing on it. You know that freestyle machine that's out there by Coca-Cola now? Anybody work for Coke here? All right, I can speak freely because otherwise I'm going to run back. So we had a company called Lancer. I knew I couldn't get it in can and bottle because that's sacred turf in Coca-Cola. But they've got a little more flexibility with fountains. So I went to Lancer, the company that makes the fountain machines, and said, I want a fountain machine that I can inject stuff in, like I used to do back in the McDonald's days. So they made the machine for me, and since it wasn't really Coke vanilla, it was Coca-Cola, and then somebody could separately inject a little vanilla in it, I got away with it. We created that machine. Ironically, Coke then said, oh, that's a good idea. Went out and patented the freestyle machine that you see now in all these places that injects things. It just really annoyed me. There's another one of those things that we should have patented. And then they wouldn't let me have it because 7-Eleven, because we sold Pepsi too. And they wouldn't let Pepsi go in that freestyle machine. So that's why you don't see those machines in 7-Eleven today, because they want Coke and Pepsi. It's crazy. But I digress. So we got it, and it started selling like crazy. So Coca-Cola is going, oh, maybe there's something to this lemon Coke, vanilla Coke thing. So sure enough, they go into their little secret skunk works, and a year or two later, out comes the new vanilla Coke. I'm like, guys, okay, where's my exclusivity? I want this for 6 months. I gave you this, I pushed you for 2 years to get this. Now you've launched it. Oh, sorry, Jim, we can't do that, we're a big company, these things happen. We were working on that for years beforehand. Yeah, okay, great. But I got my payback. This is the ultimate payback. So He's not with Coke anymore, and I'm sure he won't mind if he's probably heard I tell this story. This guy named Jeff Dunn was a senior guy at Coca-Cola, and he was leading this Vanilla Coke initiative. And we're on our way to the Masters, and I'm there in Atlanta, and he picks me up at the airport, and we're driving down to Augusta, and we're going to go to the Masters, and his kids in the car with us. His little kid's in the back seat, and we pass this big billboard, Vanilla Coke, and his little kid goes, "Daddy, look, there's the product you invented." And Jeff's face gets really, really red, and it was one of those really awkward moments, and I looked at him, and he looks at me, and then he looked back at his kid, and he said, "Son, Mr. Keys actually helped us with that idea." It was very funny. So that was my payback. I got no exclusivity on it, but I got the satisfaction of he had to correct his son. True story, very true story.
We have a question here.
You're very much an entrepreneur within the company, and so how would you compare doing what you're doing in something like 7-Eleven versus what Elon Musk is doing in terms of his take a flight into the subatmosphere and enjoy it, or what Ford is about to do, which is change how the total corporation of Ford is going to be operating?
Well, I do think, and thank you for saying I'm very much an entrepreneur. By the way, the reason I say I'm not, Ernst & Young did their Entrepreneur of the Year program, and when they first started it, they came to us. We had done some really innovative things, and I thought, wow, this is cool. They're going to recognize me as Entrepreneur of the Year, or I've got a shot at it anyway. I didn't make it out of the first round. I didn't even make it out of Dallas. They had high hopes. I was going to be like the national, winner, so I never made it out of Dallas. So I said, I guess maybe I'm not an entrepreneur. But ironically, people don't think of a company like Ford as being able to be entrepreneurial. Elon Musk, in the case of Tesla or SpaceX, is a little different thing, because that was truly an entrepreneurial venture. He started it from scratch, built it up. Classic definition of entrepreneur. What Lee Iacocca did back in the days for Chrysler to rescue it and completely transform the company, I saw that as being an entrepreneur, very much so. But most CEOs of big corporations don't ever get the credit for really being a true entrepreneur.
So, excuse me. So, closing the loop and on the Blockbuster deal, what lessons learned do you have? And if you could go back a few years, what things would you do differently?
Wow. Okay, that's a good one. First of all, I would never have taken on that silly challenge in the first place. I'm kidding. I would. I'd do it again tomorrow. It was a fascinating opportunity. I did 5 years, 6 years at 7-Eleven, at Blockbuster roughly, and 20 years at 7-Eleven. I learned more in those 6 years than I learned in all of my successes at 7-Eleven. Let me give you a little bit of the story, a little bit more of the story, because it does need to be told. I'm now the poster child. If you Google Blockbuster, you'll find Jim Keyes, CEO, top 10 CEOs who failed to keep up with technology. Makes me crazy. Everything I talk about is change, confidence, right? Getting out in front of the curve. Here's what happened. The company had stores. They were doing DVDs by mail. Netflix was doing DVDs by mail. Clearly, the future was digital streaming. But the iPad didn't come out until 2009. This is 2007, right? I'm out telling people, hey, we're not going to try to compete with Netflix, because they're doing DVDs by mail. We're Blockbuster. We want to go straight to streaming, because we don't really need to do DVDs by mail. We've got that program already. We've already got an exchange. You can get a DVD by mail and bring it in and exchange it in the store. Perfectly good level of competition with Blockbuster. What I want to invest in is making the stores a better experience, and then use those stores as a platform to get people to transition to digital once it's there. So we bought a digital streaming company called MovieLink. It was owned by the studios. They decided they weren't going to let a Blockbuster thing happen in the future for digital, so they created their own digital streaming company called MovieLink. Then they discovered that 6 fierce competitors can't collaborate effectively together in their own company, so they sold it to us. because we were the natural buyer of their digital streaming company. Now, when they sold it to us, they sold it to us for $50 million, which was the technology behind digital streaming. We didn't have much to stream it on back in those days. There weren't apps. iPhone came out in '07, but it was very limited application technology. And so basically, we had the rights. For $50 million, we bought the technology. For another 100 million rights, we could have tied up exclusively the digital rights for 60% of all the old movies out there. We already had new releases, but we could have exclusively locked in for 10 years all of the old movies. Now think about what Netflix is out there selling today. They'd still be doing DVDs by mail if we had the courage to go forward with a $100 million a year commitment. Our EBITDA, our cash flow was about 180, so we were going to bet half the company's cash on something, on a market that wasn't yet there. I advanced it. I brought it to the board. The board blinked. We chose not to do it. This is just around the time Lehman was collapsing, and we did have a refinancing to do. Now, if I had a decision to make over again, I would have pushed harder on that decision. We would have committed for exclusivity for 100 million. We would have owned that content. Netflix would still be doing DVDs by mail. The $100 million commitment probably would have bankrupted Blockbuster anyway. I never thought we were going to have to file bankruptcy for the company, but the $100 million commitment probably would have anyway. If we had done that, we would have restructured the company around the digital streaming. Instead of what we ultimately did, we sold the company to Dish Network. Blockbuster still exists. The company is still intact as a subsidiary of Dish Networks. So that was a decision I would have loved to have over. If I had a crystal ball and knew that the markets were going to collapse, I would have absolutely done that and didn't. Now, Dish's strategy, one last thing, the reason they bought the company and took it out of bankruptcy is they didn't even want to stream via the internet. Dish believed and still believes that the ultimate experience for content will be 5G. So they quietly bought up all the spectrum they could. They had more spectrum of the government sale of spectrum. They had more than anybody else out there. Their vision was buy Blockbuster, get the content, lock up all the spectrum, and go straight to 5G, use our stores and buy Sprint and be able to have a better mobility play than even AT&T because now they had content that they could stream instantly on your phone and upload to any device. So that was the strategy. Good strategy, but we're not even to 5G yet today. So this was 2011. And we'll probably get to 5G streaming capability on your mobile device beginning at the end of this year is what they're now saying. And before there's any widespread application of that, it'll take a long time. When that comes, you'll see what I mean. It's going to be a much better experience than the clunky internet for video streaming. It just took longer to happen than anybody expected. Time for one last question, maybe? One last one, good.
I think that one of the most creative elements is turning a complex situation to a simple one that people can actually implement. So I'm just curious if you either got techniques that you use for driving complexity out or a story about driving complexity out.
Yeah, I do have one, and actually I'm gonna take you down a different path for it. It's not an innovation story, it's a chief financial officer story. Jerry mentioned that I was chief financial officer of 7-Eleven. It was right around the time of Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron. And I was being approached, and first of all, I am not a chief financial officer. Remember that G&A study? Well, we were successful. We cut a lot of G&A. I had a point of view about how the balance sheet of the company and the income statement should be restructured. And I had one accounting course, I think, at Columbia. I still don't, debits on the left or right, I don't know, credits, debits, I don't know. They made me CFO of a public company. because of the importance of cutting expenses and driving unnecessary costs out of the system, et cetera. Here I am, CFO of a public company. Thank God I had a really good controller and a really good external audit partner at PwC to keep me out of trouble. But this is around the time of Enron, offshore tax, special purpose entities. You know, we're going to create this special purpose entity. We're going to stick it over in the islands somewhere, and it's going to be tax-free, and we're going to. That's what got Enron in some really big trouble. I couldn't understand it. I'm like, guys, all these financial experts, investment bankers, they're pitching this thing. You got to do this. You got to do this. It's going to save so much money. I'm like, I can't understand it. Help me figure out how to explain this to my board of directors. And if I can explain it to them, remember that Einstein's comment about a 6-year-old? That's your basic board of directors. They've got the... Because they're drifting in, not that they're not smart, but they're drifting in once every 2 months, and you've got to break things into simple terms. I couldn't get anybody to explain these special purpose entity tax shelters in a simple enough fashion to be able to explain it to my board of directors, so I said, no, not going to do it. It's the reason I'm not in jail today, because it was so compelling. It made sense. Well, it made sense from a bottom line perspective, but I couldn't understand how it worked. So the effort to strive for simplicity ended up keeping me out of trouble and allowing the company to do the right thing. So a little different twist on it, but I think it is a real example. Thank you very much for your patience. It was fun doing this. Cliff, thank you. Thanks for the song. Jerry?
You know, I just have to say, what Jim didn't realize, I guess I didn't know him in 1990, he could have gotten that $50 million easier if he'd used a different consulting firm.
Exactly. I know, that was my first mistake.
Thanks again, Jim.
Thank you, Jerry.